My name is Ian. The show is the Auto Hub Show. It's in season 6, and this is the one-on-one interview series. Unlike our Monday and Friday show, this is a recorded show, which means we get in deep. But more importantly, if you have questions about Shaun or you have questions about NCM, I'm sure you can reach out. The details will be below in the video, and that'll also be in the description in the audio format. If you have questions, you can obviously also reach out to the Auto Hub Show. And definitely check out our shows on Monday, which is the original show that's been going for 6 years, and our new Fixed Op show now on Fridays at 5:30 East. The Monday show is at 11:30 East in the morning every Monday. So as I ask on the show a lot, and it's a question that I always ask people, even when I do my ambush interviews at events like NADA. How did you get into auto, and more importantly, why? So go ahead, Shaun.
How did I get here? That's often a question that we bring up in our 20 group meetings. Like, who started out in high school thinking, like, I'm going to get an automotive? Very few people ever answer that question, right? I followed my brother actually. He was coming home with these big checks one day, and I'm like, how come you're making so much money? And it wasn't a year later, and I was in the business. So it's started selling cars just like the rest of us.
Fantastic. So, I mean, my story obviously got a family history, but I got in the business, around 2000 or 99, I think it was. And I remember the manager, I bought a Honda from the store and I went and I said, hey, like, what does it look like if I wanted to sell cars? He's like, yeah, you don't want to do this. I'm like, okay, well, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean I don't want to do this? He goes, think about it, come back in a week. And I'm like, okay, that's a little odd, but whatever. Came back in a week. He's like, okay, now you need to learn every car. I'm like, what? What do you mean? I've been buying Hondas my whole life. I know a lot. He goes, no, you need to learn about every single car and then we'll talk. And I'm like, oh, okay. Drove all these different cars. He's like, okay, then asking me these crazy questions. So
Hmm.
it was interesting because I really wanted to do it, but more importantly, I had no idea the adventure I was going to get into. It was just, to me, it was a sales job. And I'm like, okay, I've sold other things. It's a car. I mean, how different can it be? And then I guess what my aunt said to me, she said, you're either a lifer in the car business or you're a temporary employee. Because she says you either get into it and you love it or you hate it. And there was a guy I
Hmm.
worked with who I think ended up working as a postage worker because he just couldn't handle the ups and downs of it. The income initially was a little bit nuts. And I mean that is I think something people buying cars don't realize is it's like some of these people make $0 because they sell zero cars. And they don't quite get
Hmm.
that. They think you're just sort of hanging out and someone's paying you, which is kind of funny. But
Yeah.
as you look back at the auto industry and you say, okay, I got here because I had an interest, my brother was making money, it's all good. What has changed for you, but more importantly, what would you advise, say, a young person who says, hey, maybe a traditional job isn't for me?
Well, I think that's what the appeal is anymore. I mean, my career path is I got in, sold retail, went to commercial sales, literally got out of the business for a couple years, and then came back in 2000 as a internet sales manager, right at the beginning of when things were really starting to heat up when it came to digital auto trader. I was the first cars.com customer in Columbus, Ohio, and it just began to happen. And then the onset of BDCs began to emerge. So I became a industry expert in that. Landed on the front page of Digital Dealer magazine when I came to Germain in 2005. Spent 19 great years with that organization, and then last year just started to think like, well, what's next? Do I have another big move in me, and do I want to go out and affect the industry as a whole? And left the organization and on really good terms, and
Yep.
landed at NCM for an opportunity to sort of begin the process of helping young, newly emerging people come into the industry and help them recognize that there's a career path, which requires a lot of education, collaboration, and partnerships and things like that. But a lot of times when I mentor new people coming into the business, the realization is that when they look up in an organization, there's not really a very clearly defined career path.
Right.
And they can look outward and they can see all kinds of opportunity. So we feel like at NCM, what we're able to do is to help people who are coming into the industry for the very first time recognize that there's a lot of opportunity within automotive at
Right.
tier one, two, or three. But whether it's a dealership or a dealer group, or if it's in the vendor side, or even on the OEM side. But that's the great thing about working for NCM is that we work with all of them. We work with all the tiers. We work with the manufacturers. We work with dealerships. We work with dealer groups. These 20 groups are an amazing composite of people that are just brilliant in what they do. And we've got some really brilliant moderators who've come from all kinds of automotive background that bring so much expertise. But the sharing of ideas is what's changing the industries because people realize there's more than one way to do this. And sometimes they have to find out for themselves, like, okay, what's a good way of doing this? So we've partnered with some of the best digital companies in automotive to help dealers and to help people. And so far, it's been a great journey, if you will. And you said something about ambush. I feel like that's how I met you. I was in the New Orleans airport. I said, "Hey, aren't you Ian?" It's
Yeah,
kind of
we
funny.
actually started 6 years ago doing ambush interviews at these shows, and we just roll up, be like, "Hey, you want to do an interview right now?" And they're like, some people are like, "Ah." And so they're like, "Yeah, sure. What do we talk about?" I'm like, "I don't know. Let's just do it, right?" So we've been doing that at shows, and NADA was interesting this year because normally I'm there early, and this time I was 2 days late, so I didn't have enough time to do the interviews. Not only that I had booked, but the interviews that I normally do, which is basically when I have extra time, I walk around with my camera and gear and say, "Hey, let's do an interview." But it's funny that you bring that up because I was trying to do an interview, which I've been trying to do now for a couple years with Black Book. And every
Hmm.
time I roll into their booth, I say, "Hey, let's do an interview." They're like, "Oh, I don't know, and I'm not sure." And it's like, "But you're here talking to dealers, but you don't want to get exposed to dealers, so that maybe they talk to you about what you do. That's a problem." And
Yeah,
also, you get handlers. So I've been interviewing Digital Airstrike for 6 years. Every year at the NADA is pretty standard. But
yeah.
I've also interviewed other companies, and one of our sponsors in CD is CDK. So I did an interview with Troy, who's one of the regional reps for Western Canada, and we were going to do a second interview at the show, which didn't end up happening for whatever reason. But the thing that is funny about big companies, some of them you'll have a handler or a media person. So we were doing one with a company called BotDoc, which I wasn't familiar with. Um, and the person doing the media for the company was like, "Well, can we need to do this and do that?" And I said, "Well, I'm just here for the interview. Like, you want to sit on a chair, you want to sit at a table. Like, it doesn't matter to me." But it was kind of funny because I guess when I first started doing the Auto Hub show, I didn't know what I know now. But now that I've done so many shows and so many different interviews, I've kind of become very good at it because I've done it so much. But I realize that a lot of these companies, they may be able to put a trade show booth together or a sales team, but doing an interview is a little nerve wracking for them. And
Hmm.
that's why we don't have some things like OEMs who wouldn't show up for, say, a live show, because they're kind of like politicians. When you like point the light at them, they run away, right? Like they really don't want to be, like they don't want to be on camera saying anything that can get them in trouble. So it's kind of funny, because I did at a SodaCon last year interviewed Ed from Bozart, I believe. I think that's the store. Anyway, I bought his book and I interviewed him live at the show, and it was kind of interesting because he's fine to do that. It's all good, right? But live shows are a completely different thing, because even if you plan it out and you execute it every week and you execute it at scale, there are wild cards that happen that you can't really control. And I think that's just as true with live television. I think when people watch a live television show, they go, "Hey, like that could have been done better," but they don't realize that, like, you're doing your best to control, but wild cards happen. Like, there's not much you can
Hmm.
do about it. And I
Yeah.
think that's the interesting thing, and that's why I do live shows twice a week. I'm a little bit of a crazy person that way. But so
Hmm.
when you're looking at automotive, and I know this as well. I mean, automotive has many sectors. So if you're looking at SEMA is a good example. If you've never been, that's like a crazy show. I've been there once and it was nuts. But when you look at automotive, I think a lot of people say, "Oh, it's retail, it's sales, it's service, it's parts, it's Then there's the OEM side and maybe distribution and a few other things. But I think what people don't realize, and if you haven't been to SEMA, it's about 250,000 people show up. You know, that is more like a concert venue than it is an auto show. I mean, it's a little nuts.
Hmm.
And I think
Hmm.
there's a lot of segments of an auto industry that if you're in it for a career, I mean, I've been at it 25 years, but if you're in it for a career, there's nothing to say you can't do 5 years here, 3 years there, and 10 years here. And I think that's unusual when you look at other industries. Like to
That's
your
very
point,
true.
there's a career path, and here there's like, oh, I'm doing this, then I'm doing that, and I'm doing this. So it's a little different. So how do you
Yeah.
advise someone who says, hey, um, what should I do to start? Should I start in retail? Should I start for an OEM? Should I start for a bank? Should I start for a tech company? Right? Like how do you
Well,
advise those people?
there is no real, true, clear, definitive path. I remember um, talking to my old COO, John Melashenko, who hired me at Germain. And, his career path was he went to college and got a job with, I think AMC Motors is where he ended up starting and eventually landed at Toyota. And it's a small world. I was just talking to someone yesterday. They go, "Oh, I know John. I remember him when he was at Toyota." So it's interesting, right? And then he eventually becomes the general manager of one of the Lexus stores, and then he became the COO of the company. And so that's a really definitive career path. I think a lot of people think that, well, I've got to get into sales, and then I'm going to become the general manager one day, and that certainly is a path.
Yeah, yeah.
But there's so many other avenues, and we see people coming from all different kinds of backgrounds into automotive, and then they find their passion and someone needs to help them define a path. And when they do that, it tends to work, like because they really want to do something that they are passionate about. But look at all the emerging technology. When you think about the phenomena of social media and the
Yep.
impact it's had on automotive, video response to internet leads. That's something that didn't exist several years ago, and now it's pretty much protocol to do those sort of things. But I think once people get in, they realize it's a really small world. We all know each other somehow, some way. We're all connected to each other through relationships. But I think what's exciting is that some of these companies, I've always made it a principle of making sure that when I team up with a partner, especially a digital partner, and maybe we move away from that strategy, but we notice that business stays in business, and it's because they keep innovating, they keep coming up with new ideas. And companies like Trade Pending, for example, and Bryce and his team, he keeps buying these companies, and his Martech stack gets deeper and deeper. Impel just recently buying Outsell, another really cool acquisition. And
Right.
now we're starting to see the emergence of AI and how that's impacting how we do business and how we communicate and how we talk to customers. But and what's really interesting is that if someone has really good people skills, like they can help create a great customer experience, they're going to excel in this business because that is the one thing that is a differentiator. And the OEMs know it. Most respectable dealer groups know it, is that the better they can create that customer experience, the more likelihood that customer is going to stay sticky to that dealership or that dealer group. And that's what we need to help people do is just continually get better when it comes to the human side of this thing. We call it the high touch behind the high tech.
Yeah.
And did a video of interview with Active Engage when we were at NADA, and we talked about that because they still use live agents to conduct their chats. And I think that's powerful, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, I had an experience which is NADA related. So I had these shirts that were shipped to New Orleans. I got here the last day, so I had like running around trying to give them to people. And then I was supposed to
Hmm.
get new ball caps to go with them. Well, they didn't show up until about a week after the event. And then
Oh,
I'm
no.
trying to interface with the hotel. Okay, and now I need those redistributed. They couldn't seem to handle it. Then I talked to the guys who sold them to me. They couldn't seem to handle it. So yesterday, a month later now, I talked to the two package moving people. So I talked to the FedEx people and I talked to the UPS people. And I said, okay, I got a really simple request. I got a box in a hotel in New Orleans, and I need that box to be relocated to where I'm at now. So I need to go from A to B. How does that work? And they're like, So I talked to the UPS store around the corner from my house. He said, "Oh, I can't do that. You got to go talk to UPS." So then I called UPS and I said, "Okay, box is at this location. It needs to be moved to this location." "Oh, we can't help you with that. You got to do it online." So I tried to do it online. It was a train wreck. Couldn't get it done. The thing kept breaking. I called them. They couldn't help me, whatever. So then I went to the FedEx side. I said, "Okay, can you do this for me?" A box is in location A. It needs to move to box location B. How do I do that? So they had someone in the Philippines who tried to help me. That didn't work out. So I eventually created an account, got a person located in North America, and eventually got it done. But what was funny about it was almost 30 years ago now, I worked in freight and logistics. So I used to move freight around the world of all types. Log homes, frozen intestines for Japan, dry freight, reefer freight, vegetables, you name it, we moved it. And I'm going, that's complicated. And it was no problem. I did it every day for a year, no problem. But moving a box from here to here without a person is virtually impossible. Even if you got video training and they try to automate it, it doesn't work well. And it was funny because there's a lot of moving parts, but that person helping is the key to part of that success. And it's funny because one of the sponsor show VidCalls and me, we got together to promote their product, and really that it's all about, yeah, I need help, click help. And that to
Yeah.
me is a game changer because you really need that personal experience when you need it. I mean, some people may buy a car like they buy a refrigerator at Costco, like whatever. They go and they buy it online and they ship it, whatever, that's fine. But even the simplest thing, and this is a pretty simple process. It's like I'm buying a sandwich on Uber Eats and I want it delivered. Okay, I'm moving the sandwich from the subway to my house. Like, click, done, right? But it wasn't that easy. It was kind of interesting. And obviously, I'm moving it from country to country, whatever. But at the end of the day, what the interesting thing is it wasn't about pricing. It was about experience, to your point. If I
Mm-hmm.
want to buy my car with the digital retail process, I want to custom configure it like a Porsche to pick a random product. I want as a dealer to make sure that I'm having that right experience. I want to book a service appointment, and I worked for a couple years ago that did that. I actually just had a service done on my car, and I actually had to convince the service writer to sell me wiper blades. Like I
Oh
was
my
there, I'm like,
gosh.
I need wiper blades. Do you sell those? Oh yeah. Well, what type? Well, I sell these two types. Okay, what's the better one? These ones? Oh, they're more expensive. Don't care. Put them on the car. He's like, well, what ones do you want? I'm like, a full set. He's like, well, some people just do the front. No, do all three. Do them today. Make it happen.
Yeah.
Stop
You
talking
know,
about why I shouldn't do it. Stop.
it
Right?
it's interesting that you bring that up because one thing that we've been teaching, and I do teach in either webinar format or in person and going to dealer groups,
Yeah.
but it's the spidey senses, and that is that how can we teach our people to recognize when something's just not right, and I use the example of a cashier who's cashing out a customer in the service department, and you just get the feeling like the customer's not happy. They have questions. They're not sure why their bill's so much, but um, they're looking at them and they're going, something's not right. And how do we teach people to sort of say, hey, is there something wrong? And that goes a long way before that customer actually leaves the premises. And I think we've got to show people like, look, if you sense something's wrong, if you see something, say something kind of thing. And we mentioned AI earlier, and I think there's a lot of people who think that AI is going to take over the world, and I think one of the best hybrid experiences I actually have was when I was sitting at the airport trying to get to New Orleans. Literally, I'm at the gate and I'm going, I'm not going to make my connection. So I went up to the counter and I asked the attendant there, and I was like, hey, I don't think I'm going to make my connection. She says, no, no, no problem. We'll get you to New Orleans. I said, no, you're not going to get me to New Orleans. I'm not sleeping in the airport tonight. So you know what she said? She says, okay, if you want to rebook your flight, she says, I can't do it here. I'm like, okay. She says, I'll tell you what to do. She says, log on to the Delta app and use the chat. And I was like, you're serious? She says, trust me. I just did this with my son. I said, you're serious? And she goes, yes. Ian, I want to tell you something. It was one of the best chat experiences I ever had because the chat bot knew that I wanted to change my flight. And there was this handoff says, okay, we've done as much as we can. I have to get a live agent on the phone.
Yeah.
Hold, please.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. And you know what? 8 minutes, 15 minutes later, my flight was rescheduled. My flight home when I met you at the gate, that was solidified, but I had to rebook on a different airline. But I'm like, that's the point. Is like it does still require human interaction.
Oh yeah.
And the
Oh
person
yeah.
who got on the phone was fantastic, you know?
Well, but
So,
I'll give you an experience, and granted, mine was different than yours getting there. And I was also flying Delta, so it was the same airline, and it was interesting just because I put a poll up after I got back. I said, okay, what's the longest you've ever been in an airport? And I was thinking of the echo of that Robin Williams movie, I think it was, or somebody in the '80s, where you stuck in the airport. I'm trying to think the actor. Anyway, I watched the movie when I got home because I was curious, but the average number for all the people who voted was at least 1 day. I was in Atlanta for over 2 days. And the thing that was
hmm,
funny was it was like they were trying to get ahead of it. So when I left from Calgary and I flew the first flight to Atlanta, they were like, there could be weather the day before. It could be a weather event. So then when you get there, as soon as you land, they're like, oh, everything's canceled because of weather. So I'm like, okay, fine, everything's canceled. What's the plan? So I had to go. I walked from the gate to the customer service area, which is in Atlanta. It's in every. It's a huge airport, so in every terminal area they've got one of these. So you get there, and there's a person standing there with an iPad, but there's a sign with a QR code. And he goes, "Oh, don't talk to me. Scan the QR code." I said, "Okay." Scan the QR code, and then I'm in line. So there's like a virtual line, I guess, or whatever. And there's like a
mm-hmm.
row of people. And he goes, okay, Mr. Nethercutt. I'm like, well, I'm here. I've been here for 10 seconds. You could have just let me like move to the agent. So then I went down. I talked to the agent. They're like, oh, flights are canceled, and there might be a flight out tonight. I said, no problem. Book me on that flight. So then all these flights are canceled. I got to that flight, and that was canceled. So I had to walk back. And I was like, okay, maybe I take a car. Maybe I like get my baggage, throw it in a car and drive. My wife's like, no, that's not a good idea. Whatever. So they were like, well, we can't really help you. There's no solution. You have to come back tomorrow. I said, fine. So I'm walking out. So I went to the check-in part if you were to walk in the airport, and I talked to them. They said, oh, we can do something for you. They can't do this, but we can do it. I'm like, but you work for the same airline. They're like, oh yeah, but we have tricks they don't have. I'm like, okay, fine. Put me on the airplane tomorrow. So that's what they did. And I'm like, ask him about the luggage. He goes, no, you can't get that. I mean, you'd be waiting a day to get that out because it's all secured and whatever. So I'm like, no problem. So I get there the next morning. Same thing. All the flights are canceled again. So I
Oh,
have to go back to the terminal. And I said, it's the same guy, same fucking terminal, same thing, same problem. I said, dude, how long are we going to do this? He goes, what do you mean? I go, I'm going to be here all day. Like, I know it, everyone knows it. So I'm going to come back to see you every couple hours. Like, the next flight, am I on it? No, it's canceled. Next flight. So eventually, that night, there was a flight that flew out. So I get there and I said to my wife, I said, there's 66 people on standby.
oh
Uh,
my God.
we're gonna go stay in a hotel, not the one we stayed at last night. We're gonna go stay at another one. And she goes, "Why?" I said, "Nobody's getting on." And a buddy of mine from Montana, I think, was there, and he was like number 3 on the list. I said, "Buddy, do you have a hotel for tonight?" He goes, "No, you get one. You're not getting on this plane." He goes, "Oh yeah, I'm getting on." I'm like, "No, you're not, dude. There's no way you're gonna get on as a standby." So the funny thing about it was I learned a lot about that airport, learned a lot about Delta, learned a lot about their processes, but more importantly, about what hotel to stay at and what hotel not to stay at in that airport if I'm ever trapped there again. But what was interesting to your point is if you have technology, be it chat, be it virtual chat, be it AI enabled chat, be it a person on the chat, be it whatever, really
hmm
that's a catch-all to actually help the person quickly, but you have to have those other pieces. So for example, when I'm talking to FedEx on the phone yesterday, they have one of these things like Apple where you have to go through these different things and you can't jump the line. You have to go through these processes. But all you're doing is you're irritating that person because the options don't help you. It's like, oh, press 3, then press 5. And it's like the phone trees back in the day. It's the same thing. But could that system help you on a website? Absolutely. Could that system have helped me book my own package movement? Absolutely. Did it? No, it didn't. So it's not just about the technology, it's about how are you implementing that into a process where you're brand or store stands apart. And I always use the example of Ferrari, not that I'm a Ferrari driver, but I went on their website because I used to sell websites just for curiosity. And I said, okay, I want to buy a Ferrari. I want to add everything onto my Ferrari. What does that cost? And I have a pretty fast computer. I have decent access to the internet, pretty technical. Go do that. It will break. Like, add whatever you want. Like, go ahead, go nuts. You won the lotto. Go buy a Ferrari. Configure it on their website, and it's a decent website. Whatever. 100% of the time, when you start adding stuff, eventually you'll break the website. It'll just break. And it's not to say that that's good or bad. It's like maybe you don't want that much customization.
Yeah.
Maybe you want, obviously you want a concierge service. You're buying a Ferrari. We love that. Can we get you a person right now? Right? Not like,
Exactly.
okay, let's add $500,000 to this car, like every possible conceivable option, and then it breaks. And then what does that say? Well, maybe I don't want to buy that car, right? So it's kind of interesting just from a point of view of that. So when you're dealing with dealers and you're dealing with people from different generations, whether it be millennials, Gen Z, or beta, I think they're called beta, how do those people differ from, say, the people my generation, Generation X, or my dad's generation, which would be baby boomers, or my wife, I think she's on that cusp of that. How do those people deal with technology? But more importantly, how do they interface with people my generation? Like, for example, I had an eye appointment that I had to cancel this week. The text message sent me a text saying, you want to cancel, just hit cancel. And then it said, oh, we can't find your record. So I called them today. I'm like, you have this system. I canceled. I don't know if that went through. No idea. Nobody called me after I canceled. Like, it's all on me to figure that out. And she's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you've got these systems, which are great, but they don't work.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? Well, I mean, let's go back to the basic premise that when people send inquiries in, and I heard there was, since January, February, there had been a noticeable decrease in number of lead submissions.
Yeah.
And I think some people are just weary of what happens after you do submit a lead still.
Yeah.
I think there's this problem we have in the industry where there is a not necessarily a generational gap, but maybe a mosaic gap of like how people like to communicate. Some people like to talk with their thumbs. Some people prefer face to face. But we can still answer the customer's questions, and as an industry as a whole, not to be super critical of us, but we still are challenged with not just what we say, but how we say it and the timeliness of how we respond to leads. We teach on a premise of 1 to 2 minute lead response times.
Yeah.
And to get them on the phone because they're in the moment. If you've ever observed this at an airport, is what happens when everyone's waiting to get on the plane. Typically, 99% of the people are just staring at their phones. And I bring this story up because it happened to me when I was in St. Louis catching a flight home. And I was sitting in one of those little rocking chairs and I was watching people come off the plane. And I noticed this young couple who's probably, is the same age as my kids are, early 20s. And I noticed that they had inauguration sweatshirts on. And I went up to them and I said, hey, were you guys at the inauguration? And you would not believe, they went on, they talked for 5 minutes and like, oh, it was a great experience and all this various stuff. But it was because I put my phone down and I wasn't looking at my phone, but I was engaging with people. Yeah. And people will talk to you if you're, not scary. But it wasn't a creep factor in that. But, whether you're a boomer or you're a beta, from boomer to beta, people do communicate, but they're, to your point, their styles of communication are vastly different. And I remember a story about my daughter. She was having a problem with her checking account. She was still in high school. She's like, can I just text someone? I'm like, no, sweetheart, you're going to actually have to go to the branch and talk to a human being. Oh my gosh. It's interesting because today she's a hairstylist and she talks all the time. So it is, that's what the great thing about the car business is that we have all this technology. We have all these wonderful cars and vehicles, and we have electric, and we have, the Ferraris and the Porsches of the world. But, the human factor is still relevant in automotive, and that's what's exciting. But someone's going to have to teach everybody the ropes, and that's what we're excited about it at NCM is with our digital solutions team is helping dealers not only traverse the digital landscape, but doing it with their teams in place and creating accountability and collaboration and cooperation. And quite honestly, we teach a lot of partnership development too. There's some really good companies out there that we partner with that make this journey much, much easier because there's someone, a human, on the other side of this that is responsible for account management, that's responsible for creating success or creating support situations. It still takes people to do all this, and that's what's exciting about our business today is we haven't gotten rid of that.
So someone's looking at NCM. I mean, I know you guys do 20 groups. You help dealers with different problems. You probably do consulting and training. Like, why does someone come to MCM? What kind of solutions do you offer, and how would someone find out more? Like, I know the company, I know the reputation, I've seen the emails. I just don't know much about what you guys do other than that you're out there doing a bunch of stuff. So, what services do you offer? How would someone get information? How would they get started? Those kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, NCM Associates .com is the website. And once you get there, you can
Details
see
below.
that yeah, there's 20 groups, that is what they're probably best known for. And they've been doing it for a long time. And some of these 20 groups that I've experienced just had their 150th meeting. I'm going to a meeting next month in Dallas for Ford dealers, and that's like the original 20 group for all of NCM.
Wow.
But what's nice is that NCM has grown now. We've gotten the digital solutions team, which has really been brought in by David Kane and his company being absorbed into the company. And then the Spader organization, which does things like power sports, Harley Davidson, RV, boat, and marine, and that's another section of business where similar processes, similar requirements, and those are now part of the NCM world too. So whether it's training and development, there's a GMEP program that is fantastic that gets a general manager certified, takes them through everything, and it's continuously evolving as well. But it's becoming an amazing educational platform for the industry for people to say, look, one of the needs that we've recognized lately has been the need for vehicle acquisition groups. And the response to that request already has been phenomenal. People are hearing about it, they're inquiring about it, and they're raising their hand and saying, "Man, I want to be a part of that." So all things automotive and related industries are falling right into this NCM umbrella of things, and it's an exciting time to be part of that organization. There's over 465 20 groups inside
Wow.
NCM. It's amazing.
And what about someone who's like an old car dog who's looking for a different adventure? I mean, is that something like who is NCM looking for as an employee? Like, how would that look?
Well, it's a great question because the moderators that I work with come from various backgrounds. Some have been dealer principals, some have
Yeah.
been general managers, some have been chief operating officers, some had a digital marketing technology bent like I did. Some own training companies. So if you've had any level of expertise and experience in the automotive industry and you can help other, and you're willing to help other dealers, it's a really good place to hang your hat and come and join and learn and stretch and grow and develop because there's a whole world out there that is in need of trying to figure this thing out without trying to make a bunch of mistakes.
Right.
And it's a very fast-paced environment right now too.
Yeah, I mean, you look at things like tariffs, not to call anyone out on that, or you look at EVs. I'm doing an EV drag out debate show next week, so that should be interesting based on the all the change in that part of the industry. But also when you look at just sort of the, I guess, evolution of the larger and larger dealer group. I think it was Ashbury. There was a big purchase last week, I think, or this week. There's a lot of change, not only North America wide, but globally. And actually, I had
Mhm.
a meeting, I think it was this week, with Dealer On talking about Mexico, Brazil, Canada, and the U.S. and talking about their dealers and what that looks like. but also when
Hmm.
you see people out there like Amazon changing things and obviously Carvana coming back. I mean, what do you say to dealers who say, hey, maybe it's the used car side is where I should be versus the new car side? Because we know OEMs are shaking in their boots a little bit lately. What do you
Yeah,
say
well,
to
you
that?
mentioned Amazon Autos. That's
Yeah.
that's a company that we've been working with very closely, and got some really good friends over there. Digital retailing is another one of those things where the exit ramps exist within the process. We have an expression that says for every pound of technology you put in the dealership, you got to put about 10 pounds of process. And that's the part that we know best, is we know what process or processes that work best to help dealers sort of avoid the minefield. That's the expression is how do you go through a minefield? You follow somebody else.
Yeah.
And that's what we do a good job of, is leading dealers through the minefield so that they don't have to step on them and blow up and start all over again. It's not a video game. It's real life, right?
Yep.
And things have changed in the last couple of years, and we went from 2022 making more money than we've ever made in our life to all of a sudden it's back to normal and we're paying $80,000 a month floor plan interest. Like, the efficiency is the top of the game right now, and you got to get your people better, or you got to get better people.
Oh yeah, I mean, I talked to a friend of mine. She was a trainer for a private sale company, did a lot of subprime. She's now in Virginia working with a dealer, and I think what shocked her was kind of funny is she was expecting the problems to be different. And I said to her, I said, I've been in auto for 25 years. I've trained dealers for 15. The first mistake I made when I first started training dealers was thinking I could fix everything. I said, pick your problem, solve that, pick the next problem, solve that, and stop
Yeah.
thinking you're going to change the world overnight. You're not Moses, you're not a magician, you're not Harry Potter. You're
Hmm.
going to have to look at this one thing at a time. Now, what I'm seeing is interesting, which is one of the many reasons I did a fixed op show is I think these silos are finally going to get eliminated because dealers who are smart are going to finally say, hey, we all got to get on the same team. There's no longer the parts side, the fix up side, the sales side, and the body shop. It's all one company. How
Yeah.
do we create synergy? But more importantly, as cars continue to become more and more expensive, we're
Hmm.
going to need to lean on the service side to maintain that customer relationship because the
Yeah.
ownership term is going to extend. There's no question in my mind. So that's kind of
Well,
what I think anyway.
yeah. And I will leave this with you as well. I think that brings light to the fact that dealers have got to figure out their first party data problems right now. Getting a hold of the first party data, what's in your DMS, what's in your CRM. One of the things that we're pretty proud of is we were one of the emerging dealers that created a CDP, and we
Yep.
partnered with Outsell to get that done. But we
Yep.
took control of that first party data because we were dealing with very dirty data. We couldn't communicate well. Every time we tried to talk to a customer, we were trying to sell them something, and all we were trying to do is create a relationship and a communication. But data, first party data in particular, at the dealership level or dealer group level is so important. You can call your local pizza shop and they know what you ordered and when you ordered it last, and they call you by your first name and they ask, do you want to come pick it up or do you want it delivered? And it's easy. And we sell $100,000 cars and we don't know who our top 10 customers are for in our store. It's really crazy, right? So I think helping dealers understand that there is a need for getting their first party data under control, because we have the technology now to do that, and that's what's going to be, I think that's another emerging trend. So,
Yeah, I mean, I was at my pharmacy recently and I'm doing my taxes because it's that time of year. And they said, oh, did you want a summary of all the money you spent on drugs for this year? I'm like, I've been going to pharmacies for many years. No one's ever offered that to me. And I'm like, that's a pretty big value add, just saving me all the time. I'm like, here's a list, here's the total, here's when I bought it. I was like, why isn't every company that's selling an item that could be a tax write-off offering that to a customer, maybe in an email at the end of a year? Like, I know you're doing your taxes, this may help you. Maybe you can look at ways to optimize and save money. And I would say the same with service departments. We know service is becoming more and more of a thing with longer term. What if I said to a customer, hey, here's what you spent on service this year in your car. You might want to buy a prepaid maintenance to save you some money. Here's what the difference would be. Have an intelligent conversation versus like a
mhm.
cell phone company says, "Oh, do you need a new cell phone?" Like, okay, is there something else that I that I need to know, or like, what's the deal? So I think that that's really interesting because I think a lot of cases we try to sell without the ammunition, or we try to sell without a reason or benefit. And I think in
Hmm.
cars, it's about to get more interesting there, where you have the
Yeah.
data and you can tell a better story,
Yeah. And it's more than flat file data too. It's the shopping behavior, it's the transactional information, it's the name, address, telephone number, which is more of the flat file stuff. But it's also, do we have to teach the industry how to better input the data? How do we collect the data? Then you've got your zero party data, which is really the information you collect when you're in a casual conversation, where they live, how many kids, what's their buying history been like. I mean, the things that people tell you are all ways to figure out the connection to them. And the industry struggles with that too. It's easier to put a new customer into the system than go back and change the record that's happened. But there's value in what I'm about to say, and that is the customer data platform should be able to give a dealer a customer value proposition, and that is who are those most highly valued, treasured customers who continue to show loyalty to the group because they just want to do business with you, and it's
Yep.
reflected in how much business they do with you. You know, and that's another thing that I'm on mission to do is help dealers recognize like there's something to be said about how you would treat that customer. And you know what I'm talking about because we all have the airline miles, we have the lounges in the airports, and we go to those for a reason, right? Because we feel special in there. Why can't we bring that into automotive?
Well, I think we can. I mean, I always use the example. I was in Japan in 2019 on my way to China, and I went to a Lexus dealer in Japan. That was the most pleasant car dealership experience I've ever seen, bar none. Pick your country, pick your state, pick your city. And it wasn't about the brand. It wasn't about the location. It had nothing to do with that. It was that when you
Hmm.
walked in, they were just so thankful you dropped by. It was being appreciative of the fact that that person could have went somewhere else, but they opted to come there. And that's what I think that's missing, not just in automotive retail, but at your favorite restaurant, at your favorite hotel, at your favorite airline, whatever it might be. And I think we've gotten too good at it's just another customer, or it's just another passenger, or it's just another diner, or it's just another product or service I'm selling somebody. And we're not enough like, okay, thanks for coming in. Instead of what are you looking for today? Thanks for coming in. Why are you coming here? Like what made you choose us? Like we'd love to know. And
Yeah.
listen a lot more. And I think that's
Mhm.
where brands and dealers and OEMs and groups are going to get either really, really good, so they retain those customers and make a good living and help the customer, or they're going to get really, really bad and they're going to lose customers, which I think
Mhm.
is a direct hangover from the pandemic when they might have been charging more than list for cars. People
Yeah.
haven't forgotten that. Like they're not
No.
happy. So that
No.
you've got to do something to fix that problem. I don't know how you're going to do it, but I think that's going to be the biggest challenge in the next 18 months, in my opinion, maybe 2 years. Is how
Yeah.
do you
No,
make
you're absolutely right. Good customer service in against the backdrop of what we've experienced over the last couple of years really stands out. And there's that's an opportunity for automotive to really excel. If we can get that part figured out and create good customer experiences with people, make it memorable and show people that we appreciate them. And it just goes a long way to creating longevity. And one of the things we're trying to teach dealer groups in this same regard is when you have new people coming into the business, one thing we ask them is like, how many times do you ever go into the customer lounge and just introduce yourself to someone who's sitting in the lounge? Not to sell them a car, not to buy them the car, but just have a conversation. It's a great training ground to say, "Hi, thanks for doing business with us today. We really appreciate it.
Yep.
Did you buy your car here? What kind of car do you have? That kind of thing." But just getting people the ability to talk to people.
Yep.
It's like it's not hard,
Yep.
but you gotta practice that a little bit too.
Yeah, I was in a customer lounge at my local Chrysler Dodge Jeep Ram dealers getting some service done. I had to do a Zoom call. So I go up to this customer lounge and they have basically a convenience store full of stuff. Like a Slurpee machine and all this stuff. And then they had signs like, "Oh, if you want to buy this, you could pay for it downstairs." And I'm like, that makes no sense at all. I'm like, you create this experience that's like a restaurant where basically it's on them. And then you're like, oh yeah, by the way, make sure you hit us on the way out for the cost. And I'm like, it was like the start of something interesting, and then it became a train wreck. Like if you go to a Mercedes store, they're not charging you for the Danish. Like they know you're there
Yeah.
buying the car or fixing a car. They don't care. Like whatever. You want to talk,
Yeah.
like giddy up. You
Exactly.
want Starbucks coffee, like giddy up. Like we don't care. But it was
Yeah.
kind of funny just because the expectation was really high, and then they let it down by just not delivering on the
Hmm.
detail. And that's I
Yeah.
think where some dealers go wrong, or even some hotels. I mean, I've been at high end hotels sometimes where the coffee's free at reception until the restaurant opens, and then there's no more free coffee.
Oh my
It's like,
gosh.
what does it really cost them to have free coffee 24/7? Like, just give them free coffee. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah. It's not
You know.
that personalization is so important, and just, being able to put the human factor back into the car buying experience makes all the difference in the world to some people. They just want to feel important. It's and look, it's what average length of a car now is what, 12 years on the
Hmm.
road?
Hmm.
If you haven't bought a car in 10 years, you're in for a shock. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I bought a car when I moved to where I'm living now, and the reason I bought it was the one I had was just a little bit too fancy for the market. And I was a little shocked at the price of the vehicle. I was like, I've never spent this much on a used car in my life, or a new car, sorry, it
hmm
was. And I'm like,
hmm
you set the expectation pretty high now. What does that look like next time? I don't know. But at the same time, I think part of it is just the technology in cars today. There's so much that they put in because they think people want it, as opposed to what do you actually want, Mr. Customer? Or what do you like? I think the manufacturer needs to get better at connecting what people actually want to drive to what they're actually providing, as opposed to
Yeah.
putting radar and screens and everything. To me, that's a mistake. It's
Yeah,
just
and I think people need to realize too is, as my partners at Clairvoy would say, and they've shown us that the shopping behavior of customers over 90-day periods, the amount of websites that they go to research a vehicle is not the same thing that you see inside the CRM tools.
yeah,
They're literally going to hundreds of website sessions over 100 days, and they are researching, shopping, and processing what it takes to buy a car. And that click trail behavior is fascinating data because it really shows you that customers are not a one click drop to the dealership. The first click is rarely the last click. And that's another thing we're having to educate dealers on. Is like, look, you cannot do an ROI report in your CRM tool anymore because it's not accurate,
yeah.
because customers they're doing all kinds of things to research their vehicle.
Yeah, I mean, we're working with a company called Let's Chat that does real-time language translation for websites and also for vid calls as we do that integration. And I think it's interesting is not only how many languages are spoken in a certain urban market or even rural market, but what's the journey of that Spanish customer, that French customer, or that Chinese customer versus an English customer? What does that look like? And how
Hmm.
can that be customized so the total experience from website to smartphone to dealership could all be customized to that, maybe different culture, different language, different preferences. And I think dealerships and brands globally make the mistake where it's like, okay, my de facto language is English, maybe my second language is Spanish, or in Canada it's French. Either way, like what am I doing that's different for that preference? And more
Yeah,
importantly, how am I marketing to that? And it's been interesting to do that. But anyway, I think we spent lots of time, so I want to thank you very much. Obviously, details will be below, and we'll have to do this again in the future. And obviously, I'll have to drop by if I'm in your town, and we'll have to talk more about dealership experience. But thanks for
that's
taking the
awesome.
time. Any final thoughts?
No, not really. I think we covered quite a bit, and I just appreciate the opportunity to share with you. And I'm glad I reached out to you at the airport. I'm like, aren't you Ian? So we got a friendship now and a partnership. We know some of the same people, and I think as an industry as a whole, and there's a lot of great people that want to move the industry forward, and those are the ones we want to work with.
Fantastic. And of course, the tagline for the show is making the industry better one show at a time. That's what the show is founded on, and that's really the mission. So I believe anyone in auto who's helping dealers and really their heart's in it is trying to do that. And I think we
Hmm.
can create that elevated experience and reputation for auto and move us up a few notches from two below a politician in the most hated profession in the universe. Because my brother, when I got an auto, was like, "What are you doing, dude? That's a mistake." So I agree with you 100%. It's possible, but more importantly, if people on an airline who hate airlines can love airlines, I think they can love car buying as well. But thanks for the
Absolutely.
time and
Thank
happy
you.
Friday. Have yourself
You
a
too.
great weekend. Travel safe.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Take care.
Yep.